Did you know the FBI believes there are as many as 25 serial killers active at any given time? However, the Murder Accountability Project believes that number to be closer to 2,000. Welcome. I'm Jay.
I'm T.
We are Fatal Blend.
This is where we talk about two things we absolutely love. A little bit of coffee and a lot of true crime. Specifically, serial killers. Yay!
Just so the people know out there, I hit our intro button twice, so we had to sit through 2 intros, which will be edited out. So that's the reason for the celebration this time. Because instead of hitting the intro button, I unmuted us.
He did it right.
So here we are.
We are here.
Finally.
Yeah. I don't want to take too much time to talk about a bunch of stuff because this one's... I don't know if it's going to be a long episode, but it was a lot of research. It was a lot of research.
All right. So let's just jump right into it and talk about what we're drinking today.
Because this is going to be a doozy. And I mean a fucking doozy. I am actually just drinking some lemonade because, to be honest,
you need something refreshing.
Yeah, that's the word I'm looking for. I need something refreshing because this shit is going to be rough.
It's going to be dark.
This is going to be rough.
And since it's going to be so rough, you're going to need a doctor. I'm drinking Dr. Pepper. No affiliation.
Zero or sugar-free?
Zero sugar.
Zero sugar.
We don't like sugar unless it's in our tea.
Nobody wants sugar in their teeth.
Just weird people don't.
Tea. I thought you said your teeth. I'm like, that's literally how cavities are made.
Sugar in my teeth.
I'm like, that's not how that works.
As you can tell, it's been a day.
It's been a day.
So, let's jump into this.
Now, Jay does not know most of what's going to be talked about, but I have given him fair warning because this episode
is fucked up.
Is hard. And this is somebody, a lot of you may have already heard of him because he is a fairly well-known serial killer. I knew who he was before I did the research. I just didn't know as much as I did. I found a lot of information that made me not want to do this, but I think that we should all, it's information. So we're going to start this out by saying this is a very tough episode. It was a very tough episode to research, and it's a very tough episode to talk about. It has to do with killing young children and gruesome murders. So while I'm not going to go into extreme detail about the murders like in the story, there are pieces that are important to the story that I do need to tell. So there are going to be some gruesome ass shit, and I will try to remember before I speak on him to be like, gruesome warning, right? So that if you don't want to listen, plug your ears for a hot few seconds. Now, also, there is no problem if you just don't want to hear about this garbage ass human. Because if I'm being very honest, I don't want to talk about this garbage ass human, but I did the research, and I think that it would be doing everybody in the world a disservice by not sharing how big of a pile of shit he is, because he is a well-known serial killer.
So, if you don't want to listen, have a great day, and we'll see you next episode.
Yes.
But if you do want to listen, be ready.
We are talking about Albert Fish. Now, Albert Fish is nicknamed the Werewolf of Wisteria, the Gray Man, Brooklyn Vampire, Moon Maniac, and the Boogeyman. He has 3 or more victims. He has 3 known victims, but he has a claim to many more. His dates of murder were 1924 to 1934. This happened in New York. The method of murder was strangulation and stabbing. Okay, some characteristics of his murder. Cannibalism, which I'm sure we all know what cannibalism is. It's when you eat body parts. Pedophilia. We all know what a pedophile is. Coprophilia, which is an intense interest or pleasure from feces. Urophilia, which is sexual arousal from urine or urination. And sadism, which is pleasure from inflicting pain, suffering, or humiliation. So these are all characteristics of the murders. And once again, before we get into it, please remember the murders were children. But we do have background and quite a bit of it. So that's good. Albert Fish was born May 19th, 1870 in Washington, D.C. And he was actually born Hamilton Howard Fish. That was like his given name. And yes, we will get into it as to why his name has changed. But that was what he was actually born Hamilton Howard. Okay, not Albert. He was the youngest of 4 children, Walter, Annie, Edwin, and then Hamilton. So he had 3 other siblings. Now, his parents were Randall and Ellen Fish, and his father was actually 43 years older than his mother. He was actually born when his father was 75 years old.
Damn.
Now, Randall dies October 16th, 1875. And if you didn't do the math, that means Albert was 5 years old when his dad died. And he died of a heart attack. Now, at this time, Albert is then shipped off to St. John's Orphanage in Washington to live because his mother could not afford her children after the father passed away. Now, he was regularly abused in the orphanage, and unfortunately, due to this abuse, this actually led to him eventually enjoying the abuse that he was receiving, which kind of leads into his sadism thing. Now, while he's living in the orphanage, he actually ends up changing his name to Albert. Now, he changes his name to Albert because all of the other kids in the orphanage had nicknamed him Ham and Eggs, and that's what they would call him. Because his name was Hamilton, right? And then I don't know why they said eggs, but Hamilton. So I can understand the ham part.
Rolls together, ham and eggs.
So he really didn't like it. And so he actually chose the name Albert because that is actually the name of one of his deceased siblings. So he chose the name Albert and started going by Albert instead. Now, Albert did claim that he had experienced extreme whippings and had witnessed things being done to boys that should never have been done. It was also reported that in this orphanage, not only did he witness and experience the whippings, but it was encouraged sometimes that the children abused the other children by whipping or fighting or whatever. So it wasn't just the people who ran the orphanage that did that. Now in 1880, so this is 5 years later, Albert's mother is actually able to find a job, and she actually takes Albert and his siblings back home with her. Now, when Albert's 12 years old, he actually starts a relationship with another boy. And this leads to Albert learning about some very interesting sexual acts that he was not privy to until he met this boy. This included eating feces and drinking urine. To be clear, these activities were done not because that's just what he wanted to do as part of sexual acts that he was engaging in with this other kid. Now, Albert also goes to public baths at the age of 12, and he goes there literally just to watch like boys undress, and he would spend most of his day there. Anytime he had free time, that's where he would be. Now, Albert's family actually has a pretty extensive history of mental health problems. His uncle suffered from mania. One of his brothers was actually put into a mental hospital. A paternal half-brother that he had was diagnosed with schizophrenia. His sister Annie was diagnosed with mental affliction. 3 more of his relatives were diagnosed with mental illnesses, and his mother had visual hallucinations. So that's all within one family. So mental health issues ran in the family, obviously.
And the odds of that many of them happening to a family means there's probably something else going on.
Well, yeah, maybe. Or it's the times. Maybe it was like incestual, because that can happen too.
Yeah.
But I mean, you figure it's the 1800s. I mean, I know back in the day, like the royalty lines, they would engage in incest to keep their bloodlines pure. So there is a chance it was just like that. But also, I do want to make it clear that schizophrenia in particular, which if his mother's having visual hallucinations, she's probably schizophrenic as well. But schizophrenia is one of those things that it can be like hereditary. If you have a family member, a parent, or a brother who's schizophrenic, that means there is a chance that something could trigger schizophrenia in you as well. So that's not necessarily unheard of. Now in 1890, Albert lives in New York, and this is where he actually becomes a male prostitute. And he also claims later on that he had raped multiple young boys during this time as well. Then in 1898, he actually gets married to a woman named Anna Mary Hoffman. And Anna is actually 9 years younger than him. And this marriage is actually only happening because Albert's mom arranged it. Like she met this Anna lady and was like, I've got a son for you. And kind of like talked her son into marrying this guy or this girl. I don't know if his mom knew anything about like the fact that he was attracted to men. I'm assuming it was a no because back in the 1800s, it was a big no-no. So I'm assuming she just didn't know. Now, this couple actually goes on to have 6 children. Albert, Anna, Gertrude, Eugene, John, and Henry. So there's that. Now, throughout their like years, he becomes a painter. So he just like paints houses and stuff. And he does continue to maintain relationships with male lovers all throughout his marriage. And according to Albert, he also continued to molest young boys because that's just what he wanted to fucking do, I guess. He ends up getting to a point where he begins to frequent brothels. And the reason he would go to the brothels is because at the brothels, he could pay them to whip and beat him, which was something that he was looking for and couldn't find it. So he ends up frequenting brothels as well. Now, in 1903, Albert ends up getting arrested for embezzlement, and he actually gets sent to Sing Sing prison in New York. But by 1910, he's obviously out because he's working in Delaware. So he does a short stint in Sing Sing. Whatever job he has takes him all over the United States. He travels for his job. So he's in Delaware, and he meets 19-year-old Thomas Bedden. Now, they actually engage in a sadomasochist relationship, and it has actually found out later that Thomas was intellectually disabled. So he starts this relationship with this kid. Acts of sadism, which again, sadism is when you get pleasure out of harming people or harming yourself or beatings and that kind of stuff. Causing pain, inflicting pain, whatever. And so that is the kind of relationship they have. However, if somebody is intellectually disabled, probably they might not actually have been as willing of a participant as one would think. Now, after 10 days, so they engage in this thing for a couple, basically 2 weeks. But after 10 days of them being in this relationship, Albert actually takes Thomas to an old farmhouse. And he spends another 2 weeks there with him, torturing him. And Albert ends up tying up Thomas, and he ends up cutting off half his penis. Now, Albert actually states that he will never forget the look on Thomas's face when he did that.
Yeah, you think?
Like,
no shit.
And I don't know.
Now, did he cut it? Did he cut a chunk off, or did he like split it in half?
He cut it in half. I don't know. It just the description is he cut it in half. So I don't know if that means split or chop. I don't know. I don't really want to know, actually. So.
No.
It's terrible. That's what it is. His whole thing was, though, he actually had all intentions in killing Thomas. Like he was not planning on keeping Thomas alive. So he was like, cool, like I'll just start here, which should just give you an idea of how fucking terrible of a person he is. He did this shit while he was alive. His whole thing was, once I kill him, I'm going to cut his body up and take him home with me because, again, he's a cannibal. So he will eat the body parts of the people that he kills. But he ends up changing his mind because the weather is really hot at this time. And he's afraid that the body will start to smell and it would draw attention. And he doesn't want the unwanted attention. So instead, he pours peroxide or like alcohol over the wounded area. And then he wraps a handkerchief around it that's covered in Vaseline and leaves him a $10 bill, kisses him on the head, and leaves him in the house.
Like, did he leave him tied up? Or
I don't think so, because when they asked him after he was arrested about it, they said, whatever happened to Thomas? And he said, I don't know. He said, I never bothered to reach back out to him to see how, what his life was like. But he made it sound very much so like he freely could have left that house.
Well, if you could walk with a dick cut in half.
Listen, I don't know. I mean, willpower, right? Now, by 1917, Albert's wife is like done with him. So she leaves him for another man. Fair enough, because he's probably not the best partner. I'm not going to lie. And it's around this time that Albert actually says he starts to hear voices. And I don't know if it's the divorce is what started it. I think there was a little bit. She left him with all of his children too. So like she left with the man and left all her kids with him. So the stress of raising his kids, living his secret life, and all the other things that he's into is what could very well have actually triggered him hearing voices, which is a schizophrenic thing. He was never diagnosed schizophrenic, but I'm just saying that's the kind of triggered event that could start somebody for hearing voices if schizophrenia runs in their family, because it's a high stress situation. He has 6 kids. He works. He travels for work. His wife just left him for another man and left all the kids in his care. Which also, lady, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Now, throughout the rest of his adulthood, Albert actually ends up writing like super obscene letters to women that he finds that are advertising through matrimonial agencies or classified columns. And he's writing like obscene letters, like things that he would do to these women. And none of them ever responded.
Well, of course not.
None of them took him up on his offer.
He was looking for the one that did respond. Like, that's what he was hoping for.
Like, nothing came of it, but he did do that. So now we're going to jump into the murders. Okay, so in between 1919 and 1924, it was reported that Albert Fish had claimed to have killed multiple children during that time from 1990. So over like a 5-year period, he claims to have killed a lot of children. And he said that he actually would focus on children with intellectual disabilities and black children, because he said that they would be less likely to be missed, or he felt they would less likely be missed. He also claimed that at that time, he was having voices telling him that he needed to kill children. I don't care if you have voices or not. I don't care. Go get help. I don't know. So on July 15th, 1924, Francis X. McDonnell is 8 years old, and he is playing on his front porch. And his mother is actually sitting nearby with their brand new baby, watching her son play, sitting on the porch. And she sees this older man with gray hair and a mustache, and he's walking down the street. She notices that he's like clenching his hands, unclenching his fists, and then he's like mumbling to himself. She kind of like eyeballs him because she's like, this guy's kind of strange. And he actually makes eye contact with her, and he like tips his hat to her, and like off down the street he goes. Now later, he is actually seen again watching Francis and a couple of boys who are now playing. And he actually hollers over to Francis and is like, hey, come here. And so Francis goes over, and literally within a few minutes, Francis and the old man had completely disappeared. And honestly, nobody really noticed that he had disappeared because, again, they're all outside playing. This is literally the 1920s. Kids are playing, having a good time. They're all running around. They don't have cell phones. So they probably just thought Francis like ran to find another friend or whatever. His mother notices when he doesn't show up for dinner. So she immediately gets a hold of the police and is just kind of like, my son is missing. And they start to search. And she does actually tell them, like, there was this, older gentleman that I saw, but he was gone. Like, I don't know. My son was out playing with his friends and he never came back. And they ask all these little boys that he was playing with, and they're like, we don't know. A witness does actually end up telling the cops that he saw who he thought was Francis going into the woods with this like older like man. Well, when they say that, the mom's like, hold on, that like sounds very similar to the man that I saw walking down my street. So they immediately go to these woods that he supposedly saw them in, and they end up finding his body covered with branches. They actually try to find this old gray man that all these people had, described, but they did not and were not ever able to find him. So then February 11th, 1927, so this is now 3 years later, Billy Gaffney, who's 4 years old. Now he's playing in the hallway of his apartment with his neighbor, who is a 3-year-old child, also named Billy, by the way, both Billies. Now a 12-year-old kid is also like on the same floor as them, and he's actually babysitting his little sister, but he's also kind of keeping an eye on the two boys because they're 3 and 4.
Billy?
It's a boy, and no, his name's not Billy.
Well, no, he was babysitting his sister, so I figured they were just all Billies.
No. So he actually goes outside and plays with the two little boys because he's just chilling. His sister's like taking a nap or whatever. So he goes outside, honestly, like a responsible ass kid. He's 12 and he's like, I'm going to watch these little guys and I'm going to watch my sister. Like, okay. Well, then his sister starts crying. So he leaves, goes back into his apartment. After a few minutes, he actually ends up going and looking back outside because he can't hear the boys anymore. And he realizes that the two boys are not even there anymore. Like there's no boys there. So he actually thinks something's not right. They were just here. So he ends up going and finding the younger Billy, so 3-year-old Billy's dad. And he's like telling him like they were playing out front in front of in the hallway and now they're just gone. And I was playing with them, but I went in to go check on my sister and like now they're not here. So the dad immediately like fucking rounds up the neighborhood and is like, we need to find the boys. And so they start searching and they do actually find the younger Billy. He is sitting on the top floor of the apartment all by himself. So like the very top floor of the apartment complex. And he's sitting up there by himself, like on the stairs. So his dad walks up to him and he's like, oh my God, where have you been? And he says, where's Billy? 4-year-old Billy, like, where's Billy? And little Billy's response is the boogeyman took him. Now they search everywhere for the older Billy. They look in the river. They look in all the apartments. They look in the parks. They look in the woods. And there is literally no sign of Billy anywhere. So they call the police. The police are like listening, but not listening because they're talking to the parents and they're talking to little Billy. And little Billy keeps saying, the boogeyman took him. No, he didn't leave. The boogeyman took him. Where's Billy? The boogeyman. That's all he keeps saying is the boogeyman took him. Now, the police decided they were not going to listen to 3-year-old Billy.
Of course.
Because they didn't think that a boogeyman would come and take this guy, right? Billy's murder was described in a letter that Albert wrote to his lawyer. I will not read this letter. It is extremely fucking grotesque and very gut-wrenching. I read it, and there's no fucking way I can put that shit in people's ears. But I will just say, he tortured this child while he was alive. And if you want to read the letter, just Google Billy Gaffney and Albert Fish. And you will find the letter is anywhere on, you can look up Albert Fish and you'll find that letter as well. I will not read it because in my personal opinion, how he was murdered and what happened to him is irrelevant to the fact that he was murdered. He's 4. He's a child. Anything that happened to him would have been horrific, but there's no reason to go into detail for this child. No matter how long ago, like again, this was 1927. It's still too soon to even talk about it. So if you want to know, go ahead and Google it yourself, but I won't be reading it because I just can't. I honestly don't think I could read it to you without probably crying and my stomach would hurt and I just don't want to do it.
Yep. So this is one of the things that we'll skip on this episode. And like she said, if you want to read it, go Google it, but it is definitely not for the faint of heart.
No. And the reason, by the way, the letter was written was because Billy's mom went to see Albert after he had been arrested for we'll get into why he was arrested, but for what he was arrested for. And she had asked him what happened to her son, and he refused to tell her, but he wrote a letter to his lawyer and said, give it to her. It describes in full exactly what he did to this little boy. This brings us to 1928. So this is literally the following year. Albert answers an ad for an 18-year-old kid named Edward Budd, who is looking for a part-time job. Now, Albert answers this ad and is like, I'd like to meet you because I have a job for you. So Albert, they meet up at Edward's house with his family. And Albert introduces himself as Mr. Frank Howard. He claims that he is a farmer from Long Island and that he is looking for farm help. Now, he offers Edward a job for $15 per week, which is like so fucking weird.
That's
$15
like minimum
a
wage
week.
is
That's
$15.
$15 an hour is what we're making. And back in the 20s, they were making $15 a week. So he offers him $15 a week. Edward, of course, is super excited about it. And so he's like talking to his family, and his family's really excited. And they immediately say, yeah, he can totally take that job. Like, we appreciate your offer. So Albert's like, that's fantastic. And he tells them, I will be back. Now, there was 2 reports. It said the next day or the following week. But regardless, he wasn't taking Edward that day. He was going to come back, and he said, I will come back and I will pick up Edward. Now, Edward also had a friend who also wanted a job. And so, of course, Mr. Frank Howard, the nice farmer from Long Island, was like, I can use even the extra help. So why don't you and your friend, I'll pick you guys up.
Bring them all along.
Yeah, I'll pick you guys up. I'll bring you to the farm. You guys can start work. Now, Albert actually does not show up on the day that he says he's going to pick them up, but he does send a letter, and the letter actually says, I'm so sorry. I had an emergency. I'm not able to come and get you today. However, I'll be here on this day. So please, be ready. And he does actually show up on that day. And he shows up on that day with gifts and flowers and food and candy for the family, for Edward, and, because he's such a nice guy. So he's, apologizing for not coming when he was supposed to. Here's some gifts, family, because I'm so great.
Feel like he's grooming.
In the first meeting that he had with Edward and the family, he had all intentions of taking Edward. But while he was in this conversation with the parents and with Edward, off to the corner of the room is a 10-year-old little girl, his 10-year-old sister, Grace. And in that moment, when he's like, I'll come back and get you, that was the moment he was like, no, I'm going to take her instead. So he doesn't show up the first time. Then he shows up the second time with all these gifts, and he says, hey, I'm absolutely ready to take you to the farm. However, I have my niece's birthday party that I have to go to. I'll be gone for a couple hours, and then I'll come back and grab you guys, and we'll head out to Long Island. They're like, cool. And he turns to Edward's parents, and he goes, my niece is turning 10. Oh my gosh, your daughter, Grace, she's 10 years old.
She should come along.
Would she like to come to the party? And of course, Grace is like in her Sunday's best, like beautiful little dress. And she's like, oh, please. And her mom and dad were like, of course, because he's like a grandpa. He's like the nicest guy. So they allow her to go with him to his niece's birthday party. Well, Albert Fish says, cool, thanks. And he takes Grace to an abandoned house in Irvington, New York instead. Now, Albert ends up strangling Grace to death, and he dismembers her body, and he eats most of her remains over the next several days in this house. Now, obviously, the parents, Edward's parents, call the police and report that their daughter is missing and that she had never come home and that she was at a birthday party with Frank Howard, who her son's employer, and we have an address for him because this is his farm. So they give all this information to the cops, and, well, he doesn't exist. So they have no idea who this man is. They have no idea where she is. They have no idea who they're talking about. So this, starts a massive, manhunt. And on June 7th, police actually mailed out 1,000 flyers to different police stations throughout the country, not just throughout New York, throughout the country, which good on you, police officers. That is exactly how you handle this. So they mail out flyers because remember, this is the 1920s. It's not like we got email. So they mail out
Throw them in the old horse and buggy.
Yeah. So they mail out these flyers throughout the country of Grace, a picture of Grace, and a description of this Mr. Howard person. This case literally goes cold. And there's literally nothing that comes up until November 1934. So 6 years later, William F. King, who is actually it kind of seems like he was I don't really know. It didn't really explain if he was a private detective or if he was just a newspaper columnist or I don't know, but he had a special interest in this Grace Budd case. And what he would do, because he didn't want to let it go, because he was like, this can't just go unnoticed. Like some man just walked into a family's life, took their child and never looked back, and we don't know anything about him. So what he would do is he would periodically put columns into the newspaper, making it seem like there was a break in the case. That's like, he would like some trickery right there. So on November 2nd of 1934, he puts in an article, and in the article it says, "Oh, I checked on the Grace Budd mystery. She was 8 when she was kidnapped about 6 years ago, and it is safe to tell you that the Department of Missing Persons will break the case, or they expect to, in 4 weeks." So he's making it seem like they have some sort of lead. They have some sort of something that's putting them on the trail of who this potentially could be. And his reason for this was because his hope was that whoever took her would see it and give her back. And just randomly she'd appear one day because it's like they're closing in on me. 10 days after this newspaper article, Delia Budd, who is Grace's mother, she actually receives a letter. Now, I did not read the letter of 4-year-old Billy, but I am going to read the letter that he sends to Grace. The letter is gruesome and it is detailed, but it is not as bad as the Billy letter. Now, this is a warning. This is as much as I'm going to warn you. Plug your ears for like 2 minutes if you don't want to hear this letter. It's not overly awful, but it's very descriptive and it is not fun to read, but I think it's an important piece in the case. So here's the letter. "My dear Mrs. Budd, in 1894, a friend of mine shipped as a deckhand on the steamer Tacoma, Captain John Davis. They sailed from San Francisco for Hong Kong, China. On arriving there, he and 2 others went ashore and got drunk. When they returned, the boat was gone. At that time, there was famine in China. Meat of any kind was from $1 to $3 a pound. So great was the suffering among the very poor that all children under 12 were sold for food in order to keep others from starving. A boy or girl under 14 was not safe in the street. You could go in any shop and ask for steak, chops, or stew meat. Part of the naked body of a boy or girl would be brought out and just what you wanted cut from it. A boy or girl's behind, which is the sweetest part of the body, and sold as veal cutlet, brought the highest price. John stayed there so long he acquired a taste for human flesh. On his return to New York, he stole 2 boys, one 7 and one 11, took them to his home, stripped them naked, tied them in a closet, then burned everything they had on. Several times every day and night he spanked them, tortured them, to make their meat good and tender. First he killed the 11-year-old boy because he had the fattest ass, and of course the most meat on it. Every part of his body was cooked and eaten except the head, bones, and guts. He was roasted in the oven, all of his ass, boiled, broiled, fried, and stewed. The little boy was next went the same way. At that time, I was living at 409 East 100th Street, near right side. He told me so often how good human flesh was that I made up my mind to taste it. On Sunday, June the 3rd, 1928, I called you at 406 West 15th Street, brought you pot cheese, strawberries. We had lunch. Grace sat in my lap and kissed me. I made up my mind to eat her on the pretense of taking her to a party. You said yes, she could go. I took her to an empty house in Westchester I had already picked out. When we got there, I told her to remain outside. She picked wildflowers. I went upstairs and stripped all of my clothes off. I knew if I did not, I would get her blood on them. When all was ready, I went to the window and called her. Then I hid in a closet until she was in the room. When she saw me all naked, she began to cry and tried to run down the stairs. I grabbed her and she said that she would tell her mama. First, I stripped her naked. How she did kick, bite, and scratch. I choked her to death, then cut her into small pieces so I could take my meat to my rooms, cook and eat it. How sweet and tender her little ass was roasted in the oven. It took me 9 days to eat her entire body. I did not fuck her, though. I could have if I wished. She died a virgin.
That is one fucked up fucking letter to get.
Like, why? I'm like drooling in my mouth because I'm like wanting to like.
That shit just fucking pisses me off.
And that is not as bad as Billy's letter. Okay, so I don't know if I said this in the beginning, but Albert Fish is by far the worst human being I've ever researched. I'm sure there's others out there, but right now he takes the cake. So I apologize for reading the letter, but I do think it's important. It gives you an idea to understand of how he killed his victims. He did the same thing to all of them, just in different ways. So,
still a piece of shit.
Like that, just, I read the letter twice before reading it, and it just, I can't. Like, my brain just goes to a whole nother place, and I can't. It's really hard. It's like I'm stuttering over my words now because my brain can't comprehend the fact that somebody actually did that.
Whatever happened to this guy wasn't enough. So whatever the end of this is, whatever the end of his life wasn't enough.
Okay, well, you'll find out now because he gets caught.
Good.
Now, the only good thing that came out of that fucking letter was the fact that it was turned over to the police. And the envelope that the letter was in had an emblem, NYPCBA. Now, this stood for New York Private Chauffeurs Benevolent Association. So they knew that's where it came from. So they do an investigation and they find that there was a man who used to work at the New York Private Chauffeurs Benevolent Association. So, he used to work there, and the I don't think it had a return address, but like the post office it came from, there was an apartment building there. Somehow, some way, they find out that this dude used to live in this apartment, not Albert Fish, but somebody else. So they talk to that guy. And that guy's like, yeah, I used to work there and I took a shit ton of their stationery. Yeah, but I lived in a room in the boarding house, but I left all my stationery there. I moved out like weeks ago. Like I haven't lived there for quite some time. I just left all that shit there because I didn't need it. So this leads them to actually go talk to the landlady who like rents out these rooms, because they're like, okay, well, hold on. So somebody had to have stayed in this room at some point because it's all the same stationery. It obviously had to come from here. The post office is literally, this is where it would come from. So they talk to the landlady and she's like, oh yeah, no. Okay. So that guy lived there. And then there was some man named Albert Fish. He lived there for a while. And they're like, okay, so where's he at? And she's like, well, he's gone now. She goes, but he did tell me that he was going to be coming back because he's expecting a check from one of his sons. So he should be here in the next like day or so, because every couple of days he comes in and checks to see if this check had come from his son. So they wait. They just wait for him to come back to get the check from his son. So when he comes in, they basically immediately can tell that it's him because he's the old gray man that, you know, he's a perfect description. But they ask him like, hey, excuse me, sir, can you come with us? We have some questions that we would like to ask you. And he's like, sure. But before he agrees, before he actually goes, he fucking pulls out a razor blade.
He's like, Flatfoot.
Like this fucking old ass man, like this old ass man's like sitting there like trying to like, with the fucking cops, like whatever. Fucking ugh. But anyways, it does not work. They very quickly subdue him, take the fucking razor out of his hand, and then they bring him to the station. Now, he actually does not ever deny murdering Grace. He actually tells them that he was originally planning on killing her brother, but he tells them about how she was there. And he was like, oh, I'm going to take her instead. He had all intentions of actually killing her brother and his friend. Now, Albert Fish actually ends up pleading insanity. And he actually says that God told him that he needed to kill children. I guess you know what that means.
It means God told me to kill you, motherfucker.
So the jury actually believes that Albert is insane because it is backed by psychologists. They actually said that he did know that what he was doing was wrong. However, his thoughts were overrun by his opinions of religion, sin, and atonement. And therefore, he actually was found guilty by reason of insanity, though. I guess not. He was guilty, but he was able to claim the insanity plea. However, the jury said, yeah, he is absolutely insane. but he still needs to die because the shit he did was bad.
Yep.
And so he was convicted. And he was sentenced to death, which very rarely do you hear somebody who is found to be guilty, but know that if there's an insanity plea that they actually believe, but they still give the death penalty. I agree. I fucking agree. But I was like, okay, that's nice. So on January 16th, 1936, Albert Fish is strapped into the electric chair at Sing Sing prison. And the last words he spoke were, "I don't even know why I'm here."
I think they should have left the sponge off the top of his head.
Or just put it on his head dry like they do in the Green Mile.
That's why I said left the sponge off. Yeah. Don't wet the sponge.
Now, he did actually write, so those were his last words, and then he did actually write a final statement that he gave to his lawyer to read after he died. Albert's lawyer actually came out and said that he would never read it or show it to anyone because it's the most filthy string of obscenities he'd ever read. So nobody's ever actually seen the letter that Albert Fish wrote before he died because his lawyer refused to show it to people.
Can you imagine being his lawyer, though, and having to live with that shit?
I couldn't. No, I could not. I mean, I can barely... I have a hard time
reading that
with
shit,
my brain functioning on this. I mean, his lawyer is the same guy who had to deliver the fucking letter that he wrote to Billy's mom.
After reading that shit, I'd be like, I need a one-on-one with my client.
He genuinely...
And I'd take care of business.
And he was not like... His lawyer, I firmly believe his lawyer knew everything. I think he was very honest with his lawyer. I really do. I don't think because he didn't ever talk about not doing it. So that's Albert Fish, but I do have some shots. Would you like to hear them?
Seems a little fishy.
I'm not going to lie. This case exhausts me. And I don't know. I mean, I think it's just mental exhaustion or like emotional exhaustion because after I researched it, I was done researching for the rest of the week. I wasn't touching anything else.
It fires me up, man. It pisses me off.
And then I am reading it and I'm just like, I just want it to be done. I don't even want to fucking talk about it anymore, but I have shots, so I need to give you the shots.
And I know they found, doctors backed up his mental health disorder.
He definitely did have a mental health issue, but I'm glad that they put him to death because he was a danger to society. He should not have been able to live. I understand that there is a case in most of the time people with mental health issues or mental health problems. A lot of the times you're like, no, don't put him to death. Like just putting them in a facility is fine. But this guy would have done shit to people in the facility too.
And I feel like, yes, he had some mental health issues, but he was also just purely evil.
Oh, 100%.
Because
100%.
You can have mental health issues that tell you to kill people, but they're not telling you to chop them up eat them and write these letters and like, no, fuck that. That's evil.
Yeah,
and
that's
evil.
why the jury was like, he still needs to die. Yeah, sure. He has an insanity plea, and yes, we agree he is insane, but we are still finding him completely guilty, and he's going to get the death penalty.
Well done, jurors.
So here's where we're at. So Albert's sadomasochist tendencies actually led to self-mutilation of himself at one point. He actually would regularly embed needles into his groin and his abdomen, and he would flog himself with a nail-studded bat, which is basically he'd beat the shit out of himself with this nail-studded bat. There were also reports that while he never physically or anything abused his children, after his wife left him and he had to raise his kids, he would actually have his children and his children's friends take that paddle that had the nails in it and beat him like on his butt until he bled. So think of how fucked up he just fucked his children up too.
And their friends.
Now
I'd be like, look, Susie, I'm your best friend and all, but I draw the line.
Yeah, I was like, holy shit. Now, after Albert was arrested, it was actually discovered that he had at least 29 needles embedded in his pelvis. There's actually an x-ray of his pelvis with all these needles that he had literally shoved into his pelvis. Which again, he clearly had mental health issues, but he had so many that it's like there's nothing you can. You're not coming back from it, dude. Now, several psychologists examined Albert, and they all testified that he had many sexual fetishes. Here are the list of sexual fetishes that he had, which is really weird because you never hear of. I've never heard of somebody with this many. So sadism, exhibitionism, masochism, cunnilingus, analingus, flagellation, voyeurism, fellatio, cannibalism, pedophilia, piquerism, coprophilia, infubulation, and urophilia. I don't even know what all these are because I literally was like, I'm not going to research every single one of them because also Google would like flag me and send me to the FBI to be like, what the fuck is this girl looking up? But we know sadism is hurting people. Well, I know exhibitionism is showing your genitalia to people like publicly.
And like flatulism, is that farting or pooping?
Flagellation. I don't actually know what that is.
I thought it was flatulism. I was like, oh, you're farting on him?
No. Voyeurism is, I know
Watching.
voyeurism is when you're watching. Fellatio.
That's a blowjob.
Yes. Cannibalism is eating people. Pedophilia is sexually abusing, I'm saying sexually abusing young children. I don't know what piquerism. Coprophilia is the thing with sexual arousal from feces. Urophilia is sexual arousal from urine or urination. And I don't know what infibulation is. So I don't know what some of them are, but I wasn't going to research them because like I said, for this specific episode, I already think Google's got me on the red fucking flag list because they're like, every time this bitch Googles, she's Googling serial killers. And she's Googling information that most people shouldn't want to know about. So I just was like, you know what? Y'all can do your own research because I'm not doing it. Because I was also like over it at this point. Albert actually has claimed that he killed over 100 children. There's not actual proof of it, but what his claim is that he made sure that he had one child in every state because he did travel for work. So I fucking fully believe it. While he was giving this confession of all the children that he killed, he was smiling the whole time giving this confession. Now, Albert is actually suspected of killing 12-year-old Yetta Abramowitz and 16-year-old Mary Ellen O'Connor. So these are two people that I don't know if they found bodies or if they just disappeared at the same time that he was in an area and that he was seen. I don't know, but he is suspected to be their murderers. And they also have found 5-year-old Emma Richardson and 17-year-old Benjamin Collings as people that he may have possibly murdered as well, just based off investigative shit. Now, Albert Fish was 65 when he was executed, and he was actually the oldest person to be put to death in Sing Sing. Because he was an old-ass man.
Fucking deserved it.
Okay. This is how we're going to end the shots. Albert Fish was a fucking man of many words. So I have literally 3 quotes that are Albert Fish quotes. Okay. First one. I like children. They are tasty. That's a quote, direct quote from him. He also said, I have no particular desire to live. I have no particular desire to be killed. It is a matter of indifference to me. I do not think I am altogether right. You are correct, sir.
Yeah.
Now,
didn't miss the mark on that one.
This is the last quote that I put in here because honestly, it just like sums up this whole thing. So after he got told he was going to be put to death by the electric chair, this is what he said. What a thrill it will be if I have to die in the electric chair. It will be the supreme thrill, the only one I haven't tried.
Yeah. This planet is better.
Which also fucking makes me mad because it's like, bitches, you just gave him something that he was excited about. He was excited about dying by the electric chair because he's a sadist.
I think it could have been anything, though.
I agree. There's not anything they could have done that would have... Maybe if they would have done firing squad because they died pretty quickly. I don't fucking know. But in the electric chair, like they live for like a hot fucking like 10 seconds. So he felt straight up electricity in his body and he was excited about that.
And it wasn't enough. Like they should have just turned up the juices and just... nasty motherfucker.
So anyways, that's the story of the shittiest human I've ever researched in my entire life, Albert Fish, who literally made me second guess why the fuck I do this podcast.
And next week won't be as bad. Trust me.
Well, fucking here's the thing. You're right. Next week is our 1 year anniversary of the show, actually. So I'll go ahead and spoil it a little bit and let you know that we are going to be doing a family of serial killers. Now, I already announced this on Crime Bitches when I was on Crime Bitches because we were talking about it. And so I didn't say who it was, but Sierra's guess was the Manson family.
Good guess.
And I said, no, it's not the Manson family.
You're not supposed to say yes or no.
No, I said no.
No, you just got to.
No, because I'm going to tell you all right now who it is. I'm going to tell you. And the reason
You just said you were going to give him a hint. You didn't say you were going to.
Okay, fine. I won't tell you who it is. I'm saying this because next week's episode, not only is it our 1 year and we'll have our new intro, supposedly, but the
It'll
family,
happen.
but we're going to be talking about a family. It'll be the first time we've ever talked about a family of serial killers. And it's from it's like from early, like 1800s. So the good news is every time we do the ones that are from like the early 1800s, it's really hard to get really emotionally attached to the people and things they did because it's kind of like it was so long ago. So it will be different because this also will be one of the sets of serial killers that I got not from my serial killer books.
Bum, bum,
I did read a book about them, but they are not in my serial killer books, so it's a little different. So we will have that. It won't be nearly as terrible because this one was rough, and I feel like the next like 2 or 3 episodes need to be a little bit more lighthearted because this one just gutted me.
Well, next week should be a bloody good time.
Correct. Please make sure that you're following us on whatever platform you listen to us on. I apologize if this was too much for you. I promise you they're not all going to be like this. I try to give as many warnings as possible because my goal is really to tell about every single serial killer in my books, and unfortunately Albert Fish is just one of He's just one of them. He just happens to be a real fucking asshole.
They're all shitty.
Yeah, they're all shitty. Just some are just way worse, and he's one of them. So apologies, but also so appreciative that you stuck around to listen to this episode. And don't forget, we drop a new one every Thursday.
Yeah. Thursdays.
So until next week, this is the part where I'm going to say I'm really sorry that we had to talk about Albert Fish. And goodbye.
And I'll follow that up with the typical bye-bye.